Okay, perfect. So Eddie and Richard, are y'all on the line?
Yeah, this is Eddie.
This is
All right,
Richard.
Eddie. Oh, perfect, perfect. So for today, we're gonna get started with our next panel. So this is gonna be a fireside chat with two amazing founders of Mindsight.io, and I've connected with them. I want to say with Eddie the past 2 years, but with Richard the past year, and we've been engaging and increasing our relationships and the things that we have going on. So for today's fireside chat, we'll be talking about the lack of diversity that we see within engineering. So before we get started, I'll just hand it over to Richard and Eddie to give brief introductions of yourself, and then we'll get started into the questions.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Eddie Reyes. I am co-founder and CTO of Mindsight, and I am also the founder and organizer of the Austin Hispanic Hackers meetup. Um, Austin Hispanic Hackers has been doing cool things in Austin, Texas, for about 5 years now, and we've been based out of Capital Factory for around the last 3 or 4 years. I lose count over the years. And yeah, our group's mission is to provide a safe and encouraging place for the Latinx engineers or the Latinx folks that want to enter the tech industry or are curious about the tech industry, a safe place for us to get together, help each other out, collaborate, learn together, help each other succeed, do cool things together. And our company Mindsight, we've one of my other passion is building tools to help software engineering be easier and be more accessible to everybody. And we're building tools to help folks that have software products better serve their VIP customers by giving them a very specialized VIP experience with specialized monitoring tools and direct insight into what their customers are doing inside their products.
Cool.
All right,
Yeah,
perfect.
and my
Richard.
name, this is Richard Chan, CEO and co-founder of Mindsight. I'm also executive director of outreach at the Anthropocene Institute, so one of the sponsors of this event for this year. And so, yeah, today we're here to talk about diversity in engineering, and the interesting experiences that you go through as a founder, as a diverse founder in this country. So hopefully we can share some of our stories, some of our successes and failures today, so that others can learn from it in our discussion.
Definitely. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with an overview. Just doesn't have to be both of you, whoever feels comfortable. Just kind of share how did Mindsight get started? Kind of know where were y'all and where y'all are today.
Sure, I'll start with I'll start this one off. I worked as a federal prosecutor for 13 years in Washington, D.C. And when President Obama's time was up, it was like, oh, no matter what the particular administration, whoever wins, I'm going to have to move jobs. And so I've decided that I've done my time in government, and I went on to move to California. And when I moved to California, I reconnected with Eddie, a high school, college friend of mine. We've been friends for over 20 years now. And, at this point in our careers, we've had enough experience working for someone. And this was actually, I've already done 2 startups before that. And we decided that, hey, why don't we work together and try to do something special? And I can let Eddie finish the rest of the story on some of the technical reasons why we did it.
Yeah, basically, I had another company that called Tasker that is actually around still today and serving its customers. And I wanted to do something like Tasker, but take it to the next level and do it with a good friend of mine. So the next level to that was, how do you make sure that software is of high quality, and how Tasker helped their customers deploy software easily, and you could deploy software and that's great, but how do you make sure that it all works correctly? And that's a pretty hard problem. And our products basically give you insights into what your software is doing, to help you come up with those, with those key things that you have to know to fix and to help your customers be better. So we've gone through several iterations of, building attacking the problem from different angles until we've settled at this angle where we can get a lot of very important quality telemetry of what your software is doing in the cloud to help customer service people who are at the front lines of, helping customers actually use products. My background is I've been building software tools in some capacity for a long time, about 2 decades. Started out doing operating system development at IBM, and I studied program correctness and formal proofs of programs at grad school. And this is my jam. I geek out on this stuff, and I'm always looking for the next thing to do in this space.
Okay, so then on the topic of lack of diversity, specifically, for your company and what y'all are focusing on, how has a lack of diversity impacted the engineering industry, but also share your definition of diversity to begin with as well?
Sure. I would say that we actually have, our company suffers from, we're too diverse. It's hard. It's actually for us, right? As an Asian American and who grew up in, South Florida, in a Latino community, and Eddie also grew up in South Florida. One of the 305 represent. One of the things that I've noticed is that, even our common language, right? Being from South Florida and growing up in a minority household, we speak a different language, just, colloquially, right? Even just for fun, what we think is fun is a little bit different than what I would say the majority of the people who make up the engineering space considers fun. The music we listen to is also different. Just it's just all these small little different things are different. They're not bad, and also they do also tend to create a barrier to understanding one another, very easily. Moving here, first moving from Miami to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., we have a different type of speak there, right? It's Washington speak. We speak in acronyms, and we speak really more of in the policy style, policy talk. Out here in Silicon Valley, the way we speak here is now much more technical and even technically snobbish, right? If it's not built here in Silicon Valley, it's built in Austin, it's built somewhere else. We don't really recognize it out here. And so you tend to see that these different communities sort of build around either geography or culture or so forth. And so when I think about diversity in engineering, it's not just that, hey, we should all be of different race, colors, and gender to make up a workforce. We really do come from it from, hey, I do want to know your particular flavor, even of this type of engineering, right? Like different engineers also sort of separate from each other. And so diversity in engineering to me is being able to harness the creativity of different people. Everyone has a different problem solving approach. People have different motivations and different kinds of, humor and jokes, and trying to bring that together and establishing a common language that we can all respect each other in, but at the same time appreciate, the differences. The differences themselves actually create the most value from what I've seen from our own engineering team.
Okay, Eddie, I'm gonna throw it off to you. Same question.
Yeah, absolutely. And to echo off that, in order to harness all of that creativity, you have to really give everyone a fair shake, and that's harder than it sounds. To someone who, any person with friends, sees the people in their network first, right, before other people, and your network is empowering, but it also can be limiting when you need to find additional talent when you're building something really huge that is bigger than just your network, and I think that's kind of one of the fundamental challenges. But diversity in a company is really giving everyone a fair shake and letting people of different perspectives enlighten you with things that you probably didn't think of. And there's incredible power and and opportunity in that if you can harness it.
Okay, so then how would you say this has impacted, the industry as a whole when we talk about lack of diversity in engineering or just lack of diversity in the tech industry for that matter? How do you think this has impacted people across the spectrum?
Well, I think one of the things it has done is it has limited the impact and the market outreach of a lot of technology. When technology is designed, by a small group of people for a small group of people, that puts a ceiling on its value. There's even with the ceiling, you can see that it's already very valuable, but there's still a lot of room to grow. And I think that room to grow is having a company and a product that it could be designed, say, somewhere in Silicon Valley or Austin, Texas, but that has appeal, and that also takes into account the wants and needs of somebody, say, in West Africa, right? That's there's we're all people, but there's lots of cultural differences, and there's a lens that people in that place use to see the world versus the lens that we have here, and it's not all like 100% different, but there's small differences, and the lack of diversity, I think, has the potential to limit the outreach. It limits, just looking at it very objectively, it limits how much money you can make. It limits how many people you can reach, and having that power in your back pocket is something that can open up a lot of things for you.
So then, just to dive deeper, so then, obviously, I have my own thoughts on this, but then based on what you're seeing, especially with your travels back and forth from like West Coast and Austin and everywhere else that you go, do you see that this is just lack of exposure to the industry? It is just lack of education, lack of network. What do you see as the root cause as to some of the challenges that we're seeing?
Sure. So one of the things that I've seen in engineering is the population tends to skew more introverted. So it's, people tend to want to solve the problems that they can wrap their arms around. And when they can finish their jobs, or, even as a company, right? What is the broadest products out there? The broadest products out there still cannot cover 100% of the total population. The only quote unquote company that ever deals with such a thing is, a federal government. Yeah. And we can see how inefficient they can be in trying to categorize, 100% of our population is our customers. And so we have to think very broadly around that. So when it comes to engineering, when it comes to companies, I've been fortunate enough to work in, West Africa, Europe, South Korea, Japan, China, and South America. And something that I've noticed between all the different engineering, different engineering disciplines and the different engineering geographies, problem solving is the common thing. Problem solving is what they all are trying to achieve, but the problems that they encounter in their daily lives are just very different in every geography. I mean, overall, it's kind of the same, but they all approach it in a very different style. Having all those different styles be able to meet one another, a conference can only really accomplish so much. You see people for a couple of days and so forth. Being able to actually have engineers visit other places around the world and take a look at how you do problem solving in West Africa is very different than how you would do problem solving in East Africa. It's just there's a different approach to it. In Europe, because of some of the challenges that they face as so many different cultures packed into one area, you see this really cool collaborative foundation socially, where people after work will come together and drink wine or have coffee and actually want to spend time socializing. And that socializing actually integrates a multicultural team much quicker than, over here per se. We have a in team within the United States, and then maybe we have an outsourced team Eastern Europe or India, it's very hard to actually integrate those sides together besides having your meetings, your daily stand-ups. So those are some of the challenges that I've seen from having a diverse engineering community. But the one thing that's sort of in common is that everyone is all about problem solving. We just kind of have to respect the way we approach the different problems that we see.
So then let's flip that on the head. And do you know, or would you recommend any group, individuals that are kind of spearheading the lead to make it more inclusive, to make it more, not necessarily diverse, but make sure that we're not leaving people behind as we move forward in this industry?
No, I'm not in any real tangible way, right? Like how we approach diversity in this country, it's still lacking in nuance, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think the ideas and the startups that we've listened to today are some of the most important things that our country should actually listen to. And here in Silicon Valley, everybody thinks that, oh, if you're a VC and you have money, you're the most powerful element in Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not true. You know, you can have all the money in the world, but you can't do anything without smart individuals, motivated individuals, people who are willing to put their professional lives on the line by doing a startup. That is the most important asset that we have as a country that makes the United States outcompete most other countries every single time. Now we have nowadays, unfortunately, the system is sort of going a little bit backwards where, yeah, we do think people with money, VCs are more important, and they've sort of systemized our startup system. So now it's not a lot more regimental. It's not actually that interesting. Unfortunately, that has pushed us backwards in being competitive. And now we see other countries who've adopted the Silicon Valley model starting to outpace us.
And when you say adopt the Silicon Valley model, what exactly do you mean?
So I host many Japanese executives and Chinese executives here in Silicon Valley. They take tours of Stanford University, which I'm affiliated with as well, and with Anthropocene Institute as an executive director there. What we do is we actually host, foreign executives and try to instill in them, what about Silicon Valley? And this is, very selfish, but what about Silicon Valley makes it so special that we've been able to create all this wealth and this innovation over the past 40 years? And the answer typically is, it's the unstructured form of engineering that we do, which is allow the engineers and allow the different teams to come together on their own. Don't try to always instill this weird, like, hey, this is what the product needs to look like. This is, it's this really chaotic and complex form of coming together, looking at a problem, all sort of convincing each other this is how we should solve the problem, and then allowing themselves to also fail as you're trying to achieve the end. This ability to fail really allows you to learn. That's the most you're going to learn throughout that process. Once you succeed, that's cool. But when you're failing and you keep learning from that particular instance, that's actually quite powerful. Most countries do not accept failure as a result. And if you fail, the project's over, you're getting your funding pulled or whatever, right?
Yep.
They're going to pull out right there. Not in this country. You're allowed to fail. And out here, it's a badge of honor if you have failed. And so that's something that we try to teach others.
Okay, so then Eddie, I'm gonna throw it over to you and bring up Hispanic Hackers. Do you do something similar within Hispanic Hackers? Do you do something different? Kind of, what are your thoughts there to ensure that we're not leaving, majority of the population behind, and we're allowing them to continue with the trends that we're seeing?
Yeah, what I'm trying to do with Hispanic Hackers is I'm trying to establish the virtuous cycle of wealth. If you've never heard of that, just Google it and you'll find some pictures of it out there. That's another way that people describe Silicon Valley, and it's a description of the networks that existed that started up the tech industry really in Silicon Valley. And there's some very successful companies early on that then further kind of opened their hands to their neighbors and invested and helped empower other people to start more companies, who then opened their hands to their neighbors and then also help them, establish and invest in, more new companies. And that took decades to establish in Silicon Valley. And Hispanic Hackers is trying to kickstart and bootstrap that cycle, at least, here in Austin within the Latinx community. We're starting from a very different starting point, I guess you could say. But there's definitely there's been a lot of people in the community that have come and opened their hands to each other to help each other out. And on a very just fundamental level, we just try to give folks the tools to participate in this ecosystem and to get in on the ground floor wherever they can. And in some cases, it's changed lives. There's this guy that used to be a farmer, out in a place called Llano. Here they say Llano, but I always want to say Llano because I speak Spanish. But whatever. Anyway, he had a crazy idea. He wanted to build drones for his boss to find lost cows, and he came to Hispanic Hackers, and I threw him some books about Unix command line and programming, and he ended up just like learning all that stuff, and his life completely changed because he really loved it, and he dived in deep, and was able to do something else for a living on the side. He used to just kind of do like janitorial services, and that's what I'm talking about. That's how this is really ground floor stuff. But my dream is that in a few decades there will be this powerful and valuable network that we've been able to build because of this.
So then I have to ask, and I'm even thinking about the work that we do. But I want to ask then, do y'all believe that we are leveraging technology to our full potential to ensure that we are exposing people to the industry as much as possible?
I think there's still new technology to invent so that we can use it to its full potential. This current COVID-19 crisis is showing, look at us, look at what we're doing right now. All of a sudden, webinars are a hot item, like just overnight. It's not that they didn't exist before. It's just that I think a crisis like this, while it's terrible, it has there's learnings that you can take from it, and that there's this potentially untapped value of technology out there that exists and that is yet to be built to bring communities together. Because we're all, maybe most of us are in Austin here in this call, but there's no reason why an event like this should be an Austin, Texas, limited event, right? There's a lot of perspectives, a lot of people all over the place, that could potentially share, and the physical proximity is no longer a barrier. So there's still a lot of stuff to invent. There's still a lot of creative ways to leverage what we have today. And I think, the book's kind of getting started written in that respect.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that 100%. You and I talk about how we are just so trapped in these silos, and these silos prevent us from really reaching the next level that we can reach, right? Because the moment we expose everybody to everything, well, now you got more cooks in the kitchen, right? Now you got more ideas. Now you got more opportunities to create innovation. And that's how you breed innovation, by allowing those who know nothing connect with those that know something. And then now they're going back and forth. And now the student becomes the teacher, right? And now you're able to learn from them. And now we create this whole new ecosystem. However, engineering, I'm gonna throw STEM out there, just STEM in general, is that it's very just siloed off or fragmented, and now allowing the whole system, the whole country to look and say, hey, this is a countrywide industry, right? Like, we don't have tech industry just in America, or tech industry in Europe, or tech industry over in Asia. Saying, no, this is what the industry look like as a whole. How can we leverage one another, right? So Richard, Eddie kind of said that there's new technology that needs to be created for us to really reach our full potential. But what about you? Do you think that we're leveraging technology the way we can? Do you think we need to make some changes, some tweaks? What are your thoughts?
I approached it a little bit differently. one of the things that I've noticed is that everywhere I go, people do want to leverage technology, and people want to get into the technology field. It's not just diverse populations. It's just even the underprivileged, right? People who have been left behind. One of the proudest things that I've been part of with Mindsight is our first employees at Mindsight are, I mean, the terminology here used in the Bay Area, it's called, they're called the working homeless. So there are people who are working, but still cannot afford rent out here in the Bay Area because it's just so expensive. And they wanted to change their lives and get into technology because the earning potential was higher, and they really want to stay here in the Bay Area. You know, this is a dream of theirs, but they just could not afford to actually live in a, you know, quote unquote house. So they had to live in their van. So one of the first things that we've done was, you know, this is when we were very early on in our company. You know, I talked to them, became friends with them, and said, hey, you know, I see that you're trying to learn, you know, software engineering. Would you like to work on a project within our company just to, you know, try it out to see if it's something you like? And so Eddie, you know, Eddie coached them, and they spent a lot of time making sure that, you know, they knew they got their foundation right, and that they were able to, we were giving them enough of a challenge where they're learning something, but at the same time, not overwhelming. They eventually, after they finished their project with us, they actually went on and they got a job at, I forgot what the name of the company is. It's a larger company out here.
Hubu. It's called Hubu.com.
Hubu. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now I see them around sometimes at the local.
Oh, Richard, we can't hear you. Eddie, can you hear me?
Oops. Hello?
Oh, I can hear you now, Richard.
Okay. So yeah, so I was just gonna say it's very rewarding to see what technology did for them. You know, it allowed them to have, they're now able to afford a place to live. They live out here, but having access to it really meant, hey, how do I get coached, and how do I level up fast enough so that I can actually use this technology and make a career out of it. You know, giving a person that opportunity it was one of the more rewarding things that we've done early on. And so it sort of taught me a lesson that having, you know, just being able to access tools and software and so far, like, okay, it's all out there. You can get it, download a PDF. Okay. But it's being able to have having someone to even mentor you in how to be successful in this field, you know, how to actually utilize it in a way that is really seen as valuable throughout the industry so that you can actually make a living out of it. That to me was important, that person, you know, having that ability to mentor someone and be able to actually see them through so that they can be, you know, in this case, financially more successful.
Thank you for that. And then I did want to go to a question that we had, was a statement, and I'm going to turn this statement into a question. So the statement is from Pamela regarding Richard's point about being allowed to fail. There are stats that support that many women in tech are not allowed to fail like male counterparts. So then first is, do you have any comments on that? And then the question is, how can women create safe places so they can fail?
Oh man. I directly see that actually. One of the most difficult so my professional mentor is actually a female executive. And the reason I sort of gravitated toward her was she had to work harder than any of her peers to achieve the success that she got. Nothing was given. Everything that she achieved was either through hard work or, you know, a little bit luck. But then what also happened was she found a male mentor who also saw the type of potential that she had and made sure that she had a pathway to success along the way. And her story to me was very personal, because as someone who's a minority in this country, you know, if you don't see my name, if you don't see my face, I don't think I have too much of an accent. You know, everyone would be, oh, sounds nice. Oh, your name is Richard? Oh, very cool. As soon as, but my father always taught me, as soon as they see your last name, as soon as they see your face, you're going to go through different barriers in this country. It's not overt. They're not going to be, you know, calling you names and so forth, but you will not, there are certain clubs that you will not be able to join just because of, hey, this is how it is. Don't let that be a barrier to you being able to join it. Use it as motivation to always know that you have to outcompete someone. What I've also learned is now females have that in our industry. It's a very, very deep thing where people still sometimes say like, oh, wow, you're an actual engineer. Or like, you know, engineering. Wow, that's pretty cool. And it's some of the most, you know, it's probably, that's the only place where you can get away with saying something like that in any industry was toward a female employee. And the engineers, they're the people who say that are not saying it out of, you know, spite or not saying it out of malice. It's out of ignorance. It's just, it shows that in our field that, you know, it's still so uncommon that it's still jarring when, you know, they say a female is able to do engineering. So let alone, especially if you're failing, if you're allowed to fail. If one of the panelists that we had scheduled here that was sponsored by Anthropocene was Leslie Dewan. She's a MIT graduate, doctor in nuclear engineering, and she was part of a company that did nuclear power, small scale nuclear power startup. And yeah, it didn't succeed, but the type of public backlash that she got as a female CEO, female nuclear engineer, was really jarring to witness as a, you know, as a compatriot. It was very unfair and very personal. And so I do agree that in our field, we still have a lot to learn. Unfortunately, because we're dealing with something so high valued as, you know, startups and IT and engineering, the stakes are also pretty high. But that means that we need to be able to integrate an entire, more than half of our population into this value chain.
And what I would say to that, Pamela, is that we actually have our next panel starting at 3:30. It's talking about leveraging your implicit bias and what does that look like. So stay tuned for more information on that. But I do have another question as well for you all. So the next question is, what are some of the skills or aspects of engineering that we need to be teaching our students, our children, you know, the future generation when it comes down to engineering?
I would say a fundamental skill. A fundamental skill, I think, is be comfortable with math, not necessarily just like, you know, yeah, I mean, do your math homework and all that, but mathematical thinking will give you a very, very good foundation to consider an engineering career. You know, I studied computer science, and there isn't like I'm not doing like complex math all the time, but the style of thinking that math inspires is like the core of, you know, programming and putting together programs to do things. So having a way to be, you know, for math to be fun for children, I think is a key way to you know, to keep them thinking that way, and if they're interested, they'll gravitate toward an engineering career.
Any specific programming skills or languages?
If yeah, well, if you're talking about youngsters that are ready to, you know, to start diving into code, I have a 4-year-old, so that, you know, that colors my yeah, for say like teenagers, yeah, I would say learn JavaScript, because JavaScript and React.js, that's the quickest way to put together web applications. So for instance, right now for this for the COVID-19 crisis, a teenager put together a website very early on that had, you know, growth charts and numbers, and that ended up being one of the most popular and referred to websites for like the latest COVID-19 stats, which by the way are way more informative than the CDC's own website. and have a lot more data, and it's easier to slice and dice and explore.
And that was used by what?
It was, I mean, it was used everywhere. It was shared in the news media. It was, yeah, it became pretty widespread, and it's higher quality than the CDC's own website. That was put together by a teenager who learned how to code. I don't know how long ago. I just know that the creator was very young, and all you need for that is you just need to learn a little bit of JavaScript, React.js, and be comfortable with data. Manipulating data, maybe databases, SQL databases. Those are good skills.
I'm gonna dive a little bit deeper here before I get to you, Richard. So then here in Austin, we see, general, but here in Austin, with the work that we're doing, we see a big push in low code, right? So no longer focusing on the overall code or the longevity of the code, but more so making it easier for people to learn and kind of put up whatever type of application they want. So then where do you see the future going with low code? And do you see something else on the horizon that we haven't even addressed yet?
Well, yeah, low code is actually super interesting, and it's becoming more and more useful. And low code it definitely lowers the bar for someone to be able to contribute, and without having a very deep background. But again, it goes back to the core of mathematical thinking, and even in putting together a graphical low code diagram of something, there's the whole process and the flow of things, and that that does have some. That does require a little bit of mathematical thinking in concept, at least. I think since low code is so easy, the selling point is that it can be picked up by anybody. And if you ever need to reach for it, you reach for it and you do it, right? If you learn a programming language that has a little bit higher of a barrier of entry, but has value, like right now, like people are hiring for that stuff.
We know that in Austin, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, Richard, same question to you. Any additional programming languages or skills that students, teenagers, college students, professionals need to be focusing on? But then I'm also going to ask: are there also institutions, or are there also things that institutions can do to also help us? And that was a question by Samad on the panel from the attendees.
Sure, I think societally. Just a background, I'm an electrical engineer by trade. Since then, I've moved on to the dark side through law school and business school. But foundationally, there's this thing called numeracy that I think we don't feel very comfortable with, right? Very rarely do I hear people say, "Oh, I'm afraid of letters," but I do hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm not very good with numbers." And so this idea of being a society that values numeracy is pretty important. If you can say out loud, I'm not a very good person with numbers. It's not my thing. We've really lost the battle on being able to create a society that is even, can even think scientifically through things, right? If I do, with my niece and nephew, I don't expect them to become scientists per se, but I always want them to think scientifically about something. The reason being is, if you can think scientifically through something, it's much harder to be tricked. It's much harder to really fall for news as unsubstantiated. You have a higher degree of wait a minute, what you're saying. I understand the words that are coming out of your mouth, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me the way it's all put together, because it's not substantiated. So I think being more numeric and thinking, being okay with hey, I've had a really bad time with math in grade school, and therefore that is some PTSD that has stayed with me, and I don't want to continue to be in any type of math. That's a huge issue that we've really lost the battle. If we can't, we're really going to lose the war, because if we can't win this battle of just saying, hey, you should never say something where you can be proud of, I'm not very good with numbers, right? To me, that's a sign that we should focus on our even just younger education of trying to rethink the way our society has a relationship with math.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And those that are listening, just to let you know, we have about 10 more minutes. So if you have any other questions, please submit them either in the chat or online. So then my next question, we're gonna go back to you, Richard, is what can people do to get involved around diversity, equity, and inclusion in engineering or in the tech industry as a whole?
So that's an interesting question. I look back in my history, so if people can see my face, you know, I'm clearly an Asian American, but for some reason, but for some reason, for some reason, I was a secretary of NSBE, my local chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers, and I was the treasurer for for the SHEP, for my Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. So, you know, I wouldn't say I'm fluent in Spanish, but I'm pretty good in Spanish. And it never, like, none of these different diverse affiliations in engineering have ever excluded me for being part of those, you know, part of those society. For me, it was like, hey, man, you need to join this and you need to join the leadership. And I always wondered, why me? You know, like, I'm like, I look at a different shade from everybody else here, but it didn't matter. It just meant that I felt part of the group. They recognized me as someone that they can confide in, and that they wanted me to be part of the group. And for me, it was like, oh, one of the things that I try to live by fundamentally is, hey, play well with others, right? Understand that people come from different places. They like different types of food, different types of music. Open your mind, try to be part of it. And playing well with others is actually a really good rule for engineering, because most of the time you're not going to be engineering in isolation. You're going to be working with others. And your ability to be a chameleon, to not just, you know, soak up other people's culture, but also let everyone else know what you're all about. You don't know how many people I've introduced to dim sum. It's a fascinating thing to see a group of Latinos try to use the chopsticks, and then they end up playing merengue music with the chopsticks on glasses. So it's a weird thing, like being able to be a minority who grew up in another minority majority area. But you learn very quickly that, man, the world's a beautiful place. Everybody, like I always say, if you can be as serious with your money as a Chinese person, but then be able to love and live like a Latino, and party like a Filipino, and have family as close, you know, it's all these different, you know, I guess we call them racial groups, have so much to offer to everybody. And it really does, being able to adapt and being able to enjoy all these different types of, you know, cultures is a great way of just sort of living your life and making a pretty important organization. You know, it really says a lot. If you can create a culture that's able to do all those different things and to have all those different facets, it's pretty rewarding. It's actually quite a nice ride.
Yeah, and I like that you said that, because that's exactly what we do here in Austin through Autumn, right? So Autumn, Austin Urban Technology Movement. And a lot of people say, you know, what do y'all do? And it's like, we help the global majority get into the tech industry. Very simple. It's not just about tech jobs. It's not about allowing them to learn a specific skill, but more so doing whatever it's needed to get more Black, Brown, Hispanics, Latinx individuals within the tech space. And some people are going to want jobs. Some people are going to want to create their own company. Some people are going to create a product or a service, right? And it's about creating the foundation that's needed to get those individuals there. However, it's easier said than done when we live in these silos. We live within our community and don't want to, you know, reach to the other side to work with the Hispanic community or work with everybody within the Black community, right? We have our own challenges that are preventing us really exposing everybody to this industry, which, like Eddie said, is nothing but opportunity. There is nothing but opportunity within the tech space. And if we don't allow more and more people to get into that opportunity or connect with more and more people, then we're going to leave a lot of the population behind. So
I agree. And if no one has ever been part of an HBCU's homecoming, then you haven't really partied, right? Like, I say that because, you know, I've had the opportunity to work in diversity in the policy sense in Washington, D.C. for just for a little bit with the State Department, being able to bring others into this country, but not just into our main educational system, even for our HBCUs, just to see so that they can understand the different aspects of education system in this country. One thing that they've always remarked about the program is, man, this country is really like a rainbow. Like, you know, you can just walk a few, you know, go from a few miles away, and then suddenly it's just a totally different culture, a totally different vibe, but it's still so, you know, it's beautiful in a different way. That's a resource we are living in, right? And here in Silicon Valley, it is a little too homogeneous. So like, all right, it's the same flavor throughout the peninsula, but just look a little bit deeper. It's like, and then you can actually see the different flavors come out, and it's something that exists physically that we should try to actually get past that barrier.
Yeah, I really got to give kudos to Miami, because all of us being from Miami, I see how that has impacted how we think, and just move forward in other aspects of our lives. So just one last question and we'll wrap up here is, do you have any additional resources, links, you know, books that you want to share with those that are listening to kind of allow them to get more into engineering, more into the tech industry, more around diversity, equity, inclusion? Anything you want to share?
Well, if you're ever around in Austin, or soon to be anywhere around in the world, because I'm looking for virtual ways to host our group, check out the Austin Hispanic Hackers. You know, just search Google for Austin Hispanic Hackers. We do events in Capital Factory every fourth Monday evening of the month, you know, when there isn't a pandemic, you know, threatening everybody. And yeah, we're actually expanding our events to have you know, regular social events and other kinds of ways to connect with folks. And I'm going to put a link out in the chat to join our Slack group, Hispanic Hackers Slack group.
And I would also add on to the Hispanic Hackers group. I know that Eddie's not a great marketer per se, but he's actually personally responsible for many individuals getting technical jobs in the diverse community. He does technical interviews, and he works with people one-on-one to make sure that they're confident enough to actually, you know, apply for these jobs and be able to tackle the interviews and do them successfully. So that is a big public service that he does for free every month for the Austin community.
Yeah. Thank you. Love Eddie. So we do what we do, Eddie, and I need to link up with you, by the way, to talk some more. So we'll do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Richard, any other last minute comments, questions?
No,
but statements, I would say.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be associated with Autumn, and we're a proud sponsor. The Anthropocene Institute is a proud sponsor of Autumn. And, we hope to be able to see you guys in another event, hopefully in person next time.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, appreciate you all. Thanks so much.